It's really my honor to introduce the people who are going to have a discussion about what you've just seen and more, our panelists. And I want to say thank you to Edwin for the film, and I hope you all have a chance to watch it in its entirety. Our panel, one by one. Dr.Shana Russell is an educator, historian, and storyteller who is currently an assistant professor of literature at Bard High School Early College in Newark. She serves as the chief historian of the Rikers Public Memory Project. Michael Higgins is the land use planner at the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance and coordinator of the Renewable Rikers Coalition. Councilmember Lincoln Ressler represents the 33rd New York City Council District and is co-sponsor of the Renewable Rikers legislation. And our moderator tonight is journalist Graham Raymond, who covers criminal justice for the New York Daily News. He is the co-author with Reuven Blau of Rikers and Oral History, a finalist in the 2024 Gotham Book Prize. Thank you all so much for being part of this discussion. Please help me welcome them to the stage. It's okay, you can sit on this end.
Good evening. My name is Graham Raymond. I'm a reporter with the New York Daily News. Thank you for the documentary. It was really good. It's always really important to put the humanity of this issue front and center. It's really easy to lose track of it in the wood-paneled courtrooms at 500 Pearl Street and in the halls of, in the City Hall and in legislative hearing rooms. And so it's always really good to do that. So I wanted to first, we have these panelists are very knowledgeable, and first thing I wanted to do is talk about what is Renewable Rikers. What are we trying to fix here, and just give us a little bit of an overview of the last few years of what the ultimate goal is, if you could.
Yeah. And thank you for this space to talk about Renewable Rikers. So I want to start where the film ends. So the film ends and mentions the borough-based jail plan, which is approved in 2019 with this goal of transitioning jails off the island to borough-based jails in 4 of the 5 boroughs. So Staten Island does get 1. And so after that is approved in 2019, there's this question about what do we do with the island itself, right? So the island is not small. It's about 400 acres. So it's a large plot of land that isn't, other than the jails, not well developed. And you just don't have that size of land just lying around in New York City these days. And so there was this both this question of what to do with the island, but also this impetus to, I think, respect the history that exists on the island. So as Dr. Russell has mentioned multiple times, Rikers is a dump, is not healthy for human habitation. At the same time, the communities around Rikers have been basically this place where the city has placed very polluting infrastructure over the last few decades. So if folks have like a mental map of where Rikers is, so you have highways that circle it in the Bronx and Queens. So you have the Grand Central, you have the Bruckner, you have the Whitestone, and then the bridges that connect them. You also have things that we call peaker plants, where plants that cut on basically to make sure that the city's electrical system has the power to handle everyone turning on their air conditioner, right? There's also things like waste transfer stations. So when the waste picks up the garbage on your street, it goes to these transfer stations where they're put on bigger trucks and sent out of the city. And so all these different pieces of infrastructure have been centralized in particular places that just happen to be around Rikers Island. And so there was this question of, again, we can't put people on there to live, And also we have these huge environmental burdens for the communities around Rikers. And so that was a lot of the conversation around Renewable Rikers before it was passed. And then the Renewable Rikers Act, which was mentioned, I think in the film, was passed in 2021. And that kind of creates a very clear trajectory for a timeline when the jails need to close. So they're supposed to be closing by 2027. It also says that the city should be studying certain uses on the island. And in particular, we've been looking at renewable energy to be generated on the island, looking at the potential for having composting be centralized on the island, and also the potential for a wastewater treatment plant facility to be placed on the island. There are quite a few around Rikers. They're all very, very old. Were all built in the 40s and 50s. Actually, the 30s and 40s, sorry. And so they all need to be replaced eventually. And so this is an opportunity to potentially have that cleaner section of the East River, where again, for many, many centuries at this point, there's kind of been a dumping ground in different various iterations. And so it was a way to deal with both the burden of the incarceration of those communities around Rikers Island and the Bronx and Queens, and also the environmental burden. And how can we do that all in one, I think, meaningful goal that puts the city in a different place? Yeah.
So this is an enormous undertaking and there's a lot of resistance to it. And, I'd like to get to that a little bit later. Councilman Russell, what do you imagine, what's your vision for that? Just in summary, if you could control what's happening right now.
That would be nice. I just firstly want to say I see a lot of friends in the audience. It's great to be here. I really want to thank the Center for Brooklyn History for organizing this. I see one of my favorite former teachers in the back, and I think it's important we celebrate our teachers because we're the products of our best teachers. So I just want to thank Ms. Roos. It's always great to see you. Thank you, Susan. And it's great to be with you all tonight and great to be on this panel. That film was amazing and really wonderful to see. And if you don't know, Michael leads, among many other skills, the best walking tour of downtown Brooklyn, period. He also leads a great walking tour of Gowanus. It's like my wife and I have done birthday celebrations with Michael and other things because they are phenomenal. He is just an extraordinary resource. And if you haven't read Graham's book, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's terrific. And just tremendous history of how, I'm not supposed to use the F word, but just how awful Rikers has always been. And he's a dogged reporter at the Daily News. If you don't read his stuff, you really should, if you want to understand what's not working in our criminal justice system. So what would I like to see happening on Rikers, and how do we advance the vision for Renewable Rikers? I think I'd be remiss to not just take a moment to say, Eric Adams has really failed to advance the effort to close Rikers Island. There are not many things that unite Rudy Giuliani, Michael Bloomberg, and Bill de Blasio, truly. But one of them is that under each of their administrations, we saw crime go down and we saw the population at Rikers Island go down. The opposite is true in both accounts for Eric Adams. Crime has gone up in a variety of different ways, and the population at Rikers has skyrocketed. While everybody in this room knows that Rikers Island, as the film so eloquently noted, is a hellhole, we've seen the population grow by nearly 40% since Eric Adams came into office. So there's about 5,400 people there when he arrived in January of 22. There are well over about 7,500 people sleeping there tonight. That is indefensible. And there are clear and simple things that Eric Adams could have done, should have done, and now we need the next mayor to do to actually get us on track to close Rikers Island, to drive the population down so that the borough-based jail facilities that we're building will be able to accommodate a reduced population from Rikers Island. I'm happy to talk at length about all that. I know we're talking about Renewable Rikers, but I just thought briefly I had to say that. On Renewable Rikers, I guess it's dangerous to give a politician a microphone. Brevity is not my strong suit.
Does it make sense to you that to put a power plant, just to summarize,
Yeah.
a power plant, a sewage treatment plant, composting facilities on Rikers Island, does that sound like an efficient
Broadly,
use of the space?
yes. I mean, there are 400 acres on Rikers Island, as Michael noted. It's a massive place. 40 of those acres, 10% of the island, was given over to the Department of Citywide Administrative Services before Eric Adams came into office. But they haven't been given any access to the island because Eric Adams has told the Department of Corrections that they don't need to cooperate on renewable Rikers. We could already be starting putting battery storage, putting solar, putting ambitious new things on Rikers because DOC does not even control all of the, technically does not control all of the land on the island, but Eric Adams hasn't played ball. We could do major things to advance our climate justice goals on Rikers. As Michael noted, the Department of Environmental Protection that manages our water system, they've looked at consolidating. Ooh, this does not sound good. I guess the Mets game is delayed. 8:15. Very good to know. I may go after. So you could consolidate wastewater treatment plants there. You could, eventually, once Donald Trump is gone, we're going to build massive wind energy off the coasts of Long Island and other places. We're going to need energy hubs where that wind can come in and then transform to support our electrical, to be our electricity across the city of New York, to power our electrical system. There's so much we can do. We need to study it. We need to create a master plan, and we need to start implementation on it immediately. There's just no reason for delay, because Rikers is going to close, come hell or high water, and we need to be ready to maximize all of our climate justice goals in this space as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that. Shana, I wanted to can you take us back a bit? One of the things, Shana's been researching the history of Rikers for several years, and we think this idea is like a fancy modern idea that was born in policy meeting rooms. But in fact, you found that there's a much richer history of thinking about the environmental uses of Rikers in ways going back much further. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So, like we said in the documentary, the city purchases Rikers Island in the 1880s. The plan is we're going to build like this prison utopia. But they don't have the funds to develop it quite yet. So it starts off at 50 acres. And what happens is a few years later, tensions are building between New York and New Jersey because New York is dumping their waste in the ocean near Sandy Hook in Jersey. And so the government is pressuring them to do something else with their waste. And they're like, well, we have this 50-acre island. So this bizarre thing happens where the commissioner of the Department of Corrections and the commissioner of sanitation become weird bedfellows because the sanitation guy is like, look, let us dump the waste on Rikers Island. It's 50 acres now, but if we dump this waste there and put soil on top of it, you'll have an even bigger island for an even bigger prison. And so the commissioner guy's like, all right, that's totally fine. However, as soon as they start building or putting waste there, as soon as they start dumping waste there, the surrounding communities immediately start to protest because the odors and the toxic fumes are creating this environmental justice issue. They're seeing cases of typhoid and asthma increase. And so it's, as soon as it starts, it becomes this major issue for surrounding communities. And so we've got grand juries and committees and leading doctors saying, this is horrible, we need to stop doing this. Not to mention, cremation at the time was sort of new technology for dealing with waste, and the New York City government says, sure, no thanks. And so they're using what leading experts are calling these barbarous methods of disposing of waste and just making it worse. And so it happens anyway. The island expands. Now it's 400 acres, starting at 50. So
and it was, they used the fill the fill from from the construction of the Manhattan street grid to expand Rikers Island, which is another of so many ironies about
the whole thing is
Rikers
just
Island.
strange. Yeah. And so now then they decide, okay, we're going to build this prison on top of it. So they start building the penitentiary. And even when that happens, the State Department of Corrections says, I really don't think you should be housing people next to a landfill. And they decide to do it anyway. So for me, the takeaway, if you take anything away from anything that I've said, it's that this issue happened on purpose, right? People made very clear decisions, chose profits over people, and decided to do this anyway and created this issue, right? This is a created issue.
Yeah, in 1928, there's a famous New York Times story that anyone who has studied Rikers has read. It was actually written by Virginia Pope, who went on to become the New York Times first fashion editor. But she was a young reporter at the time, and she wrote about the groundbreaking for the first jail on Rikers Island. And they described it as this very, it would be this modern penitentiary, and it would be better than any other facility. And of course, what they were really doing is just taking a problem and putting it out of sight, out of mind, as they did with the NYCHA developments in the Rockaways, for example, or just move it away, and they tried to dress it up in this sort of fancy language, but that was the reality of it.
And to your, original question about this idea of using Rikers as this sort of environmental, like rectifying that environmental justice issue, or how does that happen? Notorious Parks Commissioner Robert Moses, Rikers comes to his attention because the World's Fair is being planned, and Rikers is creating this eyesore, and it smells, and he's worried that it's going to keep people from coming to the World's Fair in New York. And so he comes up with this great idea to plant trees around it and cover up the gross stuff with soil. But also he says, well, we can't do anything else with this land because it's toxic. So why don't we create a nursery that can grow trees that will then go into parks all over the city, because those parks have been completely destroyed to build all of these houses, and tenements and things for all the folks coming in. And so that never happens. But it does become, it's a municipal farm. They grew all kinds of things because we can't do anything. With this island, it's toxic, but it's fertile. So, great place for composting. They grew lots of vegetables. They fed all kinds of people who are incarcerated all over the city with free labor. So I also want to point out that it saved the city a ton of money. So I actually think using Rikers as a sort of environmental sanctuary and using it for renewable energy is really kind of like reparative justice for all of these communities that have been impacted by Rikers toxicity.
You mentioned all of you mentioned the toxicity. If you talk to retired correction officers, they'll say that correction officers get cancer at a much higher rate because they worked on Rikers Island. Have you come across any, if not proof, just anecdotal accounts about that as well, about people getting more likely to get sick from working or living for extended periods on Rikers Island?
I'm sure no one is surprised that Rikers Island is very secretive and the records aren't very good. So I haven't, but I mean, in the history, yes. So, in the history, there's a lot of things about water in particular. There's this really great publication called the Rikers Review. So back in the 30s, when the facility opened, incarcerated people decided we're going to create this newspaper. And so I've read through tons and tons and tons of issues of it. And even in there, they're talking about the water quality being bad, about the foundation sinking, and people, getting sick because of it. So, but in the far back history, not as much. But there are great records of surrounding communities. So doctors talking about rising cases of illness, cancer, and typhoid and cholera in particular. And those statistics are documented. So seeing, cases double just because of the toxic fumes coming across the river.
Michael, have you heard any anecdotal stuff about people getting sick from working for extended periods on Rikers?
Not a ton, but I think just to, I guess, piggyback on that point about water, which I think is the thing that you forget about with Rikers, that again, it's an island. It's an island that, again, is, kind of smack dab between the Bronx and Queens. And as I mentioned, one of the visions for Renewable Rikers is to have a new wastewater treatment plant. So let me talk about why that's important. So on a day like today, like right now, while it's raining, most of our city exists within what we call CSOs, combined sewer overflows. So that means that when you wash your dishes or you wash your hands or you take a shower, that water goes down the drain and it goes into our sewer systems, but also there's no separation between that water and that water, right? So it's all one system. And so on days like today, where I imagine it's going to rain for a little bit, unfortunately, our rains are getting heavier and more sporadic, but it means that the system has to deal with a lot of water very, very quickly. And when the system can't do that, you have what we call outflows. So those are moments where the system is overwhelmed and whatever is in the system that can't be treated flows into our waterways. And so along the riverfronts, all across the city, but particularly along the coast of Queens and the Bronx, there are hundreds of different outfalls. So again, every day, like a day like today, well, yeah, Brooklyn too, but we're not immune. So it's a thing across the 5 boroughs, but within the context of Rikers Island, we have all these outflows. Yeah.
We're a little Brooklyn-centric.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But within the context of Rikers, on a day where you just have a lot of rain and the system can't deal with that water, it flows into our waterways untreated, right? And so that is a problem on normal days. As we have sea level rise and just stronger rains, that's just more water that our system has to deal with, and more people that are probably flushing their toilets and using water. And so that's all the more importance why we would like to see this wastewater facility, and also that, again, we have to take into account just the quality of water that we live with as a place that's a bunch of islands. But let me stop there.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to bring up something, another thing that I hear about from the sort of correction officer community, the more law enforcement related community, which is this whole closed Rikers thing is just a big land grab to build luxury high rises on Rikers Island, and this is something that comes up a lot. There's a real belief about this, that it's a way to sweep, basically create an enormous new hundreds of acres that can be developed. Just talk a little bit about what you think about that opinion, that position. Is it possible to do?
So I'll just say I don't have data either on the health conditions of former correctional officers and staff, but I do think it's ironic that the people who have had to work in these awful places with these terrible conditions have generally been the folks who have been most outspoken and vociferous in opposition to the closure of Rikers Island. And I think it's because, as was noted a moment ago, I think by Graham, it's out of sight, out of mind, and they can get away with all kinds of stuff that may happen at Rikers, where there's much more likely to be a spotlight on what's happening in the middle of downtown Brooklyn or in central Queens or the South Bronx or lower Manhattan. To be clear, when we rezoned Rikers Island, when we rezoned the 4 locations for the borough-based jails, the city council approved this 5-6 years ago now. A series of zoning changes were also made on Rikers Island itself that prohibit a new jail from being built there, that prohibit housing from being built there, and of course, what all of us know without even knowing anything about the zoning code and what is or is not being permitted to be built on Rikers Island is that we all know it's right next to LaGuardia. And so you can't have tall buildings there because it'll mess up the flight paths. So there are serious restrictions on what can be built there and the scale of what can be built there. We can do lots of ambitious things. The thing that's in shortest supply in New York City is space. 400 acres is a lot of space to advance myriad priorities that we have as a city. But what we know for sure is that housing, luxury housing, and dense development of any kind, in terms of height, cannot be built at this location.
I think it's also, if I can just add to that, worth noting a couple of things. So the public narrative about Rikers forever, right, has been sort of given from the perspective of correction officers. If you were to Google, history of Rikers Island right now, I actually just did this. If you search it on social media, the thing that you get, right, is former correction officer says XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But I think, what's important about that is that correction officers work on Rikers Island, but they get to leave. I think we have to focus on the fact that people live there, all the time, and that no one should. It's too toxic for anyone to live there. It has always been that way. It has been that way since before a carceral facility was ever built there. So the idea that Rikers Island could be used as real estate without thinking about the fact that people already live there is just absurd. Like, it's just absurd.
And just to add to that point, it's so right, is, while overwhelmingly 80-something% of the people who are incarcerated on Rikers Island are pretrial, right? These are not people who've been convicted of any crime. They're waiting for their day in court. The average length of stay in Rikers Island is very long. A third of the people who are on Rikers Island right now have an average length, are there for over 6 months. And many are there for 1 or 2 or even 3 years waiting for their trial. So, while you hope that we have a justice system that is functional and efficient, for most of the people on Rikers Island, it is anything but. And so people are living there not for weeks, but for months and for years. And that is so right to highlight.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed in the past 3 years is there's sort of an idea of we're just going to, all these laws have been passed, right? The council has passed these laws. The de Blasio administration, Mayor de Blasio, signed them, and we're just going to suspend them. The minimum standards have been suspended for much of the Adams administration. The minimum standards are the rules by which you govern a jail, the things you're required to do, to provide. The 3 laws that were passed in 2021 on this subject, Renewable Rikers. One provided for the turning over of buildings that were no longer in use to other agencies that would then, and then the other 2 involve doing various kinds of environmental assessments. Those are, as I understand it, completely in stasis right now, basically. And the mayor invoked his emergency powers for 3 years to suspend the minimum standards. And recently a judge ruled that that was illegal, but the effect has been to create this sort of stasis where the population has swelled. As far as what's the progress on the laws? What is the political resistance you guys are seeing, and what are you hearing from the Adams administration?
Yeah, and I guess we can tag team this a little bit. So, as you mentioned, so the law passes in 2021 with the goal of, basically a 6-year window to get to a full closure of the jails, right? And so the law is passed as de Blasio is kind of on his way out. Adams takes office January 2022, and we've seen a lot of, I think, the core pieces of the Renewable Rikers Act either be turned away from by the city, or just kind of, tamped down, or just, make it as invisible as possible. So, for example, one of the things that the Renewable Rikers Act kind of puts into play or creates is an advisory committee. So a committee of folks that includes people who actually were incarcerated on Rikers Island, who are supposed to support the city in their trajectory of going from this hub for incarceration to a hub for sustainability, right? So the city takes a few years to actually even convene that committee. And then when they do convene it, doesn't seem like they give that committee much power. And I don't think that committee is even publicly known to most people unless you actually have been familiar with the bill. It also, again, as part of the legislation, there's a requirement every 6 months to basically to study the island and see, okay, we know that this jail is vacant, or this building, has been underused. That can go to DCAS, which, manages a lot of the city's kind of different real estate portfolios. There has not been one transfer of land since Adams took office. So he's missed 7 deadlines now. I think the last one was July 1st. So again, this is a process where the mayor has very important power in that the mayor oversees key pieces of this. So the mayor gets to appoint who is the head of DOC and who's the head of DCAS, who are the agencies for which the land is transferred from.
Michael, what's the basis for him not doing that? One of the interesting things that I noticed in the beginning of Edwin's movie was that there's the Rikers Island sign, and all of the jails are still on there, including the ones that have been shut down for quite some time. I just thought, well, there's a message right there. Like, You know, we're here and we're going to be around for a long time. So
I mean, honestly, he just doesn't want to close it.
I think it suits his narrative, right? His very like all the while I'm thinking he's ignoring Renewable Rikers, but he has time to like get baptized on Rikers by Al Sharpton, right? Like, I think that Rikers serves as this backdrop for his very like pro-cop, pro-law and order sort of way of doing things. Like the interesting thing about Rikers, I started doing this work because there was no history book about a prison that in a carceral facility that's been open for almost 100 years. And I was shocked. And so as long as we continue to quiet the narratives of the millions of people who have been impacted and then all of these folks who have chosen to speak out about their experiences there, then Eric Adams can use Rikers as this backdrop for whatever his narrative is. Like it suits his ego, which is why, you know, he can stage a baptism inside there instead of acknowledging all of these, you know, really incredible, like the incredible work that's been done and like the legal requirement to close it and to have a committee and to really engage Renewable Rikers. That's what I think.
I think that it's important to just plainly state that the way we have city government structured in New York City right now is that we have a very, very strong executive in the mayor. And, you know, the city council can pass laws that require the mayor to do things. We can use our bully pulpit to get loud and to, you know, call out what's happening. But ultimately, it is up to the mayor to choose to direct his agencies to follow the law or to do the right thing or to act ethically. And when you have a mayor that has little interest in closing Rikers or Renewable Rikers or following the law, sadly, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, as Graham noted, he's, you know, abused his emergency authority in egregious ways. Every 5 days for 3.5 years, he issued an emergency order on Rikers Island so that he didn't have to follow the rules there. I mean, for no good reason other than he didn't want to. And, you know, I think that there's probably some fair criticism that this council could have been even more aggressive in taking him on and calling him out. I think we've tried in lots of ways, but this mayor just has been a serious problem. And the best news I can share with you tonight is that there's just about 130 days left in his term.
Still too many.
So what's next? And people who are interested in this topic, what can they do to get involved if they wanted to?
Yeah, we get the city to actually transfer the land, and we hopefully pass this bill in the council, Intro 1038, where we actually have a master plan for what we want Renewable Rikers to be. So again, Renewable Rikers in the vision, not just like the deadline, which is 2027, not, you know, again, like other pieces, but the vision is going to be multiple decades, right? We're talking 30, 40 years to really kind of seeing like a full realized vision for what it could be. And so I think we have to be clear about that. We have to be clear about the benefits for that, for the communities that, again, you know, whether it's they just get cleaner water or, you know, if they're getting a wastewater treatment plant replaced, then, you know, if you live in Astoria or College Point, well, you know, you live next to a facility that doesn't smell as bad because it's just not doing that much work. We have to do a lot of education because, again, this is going to be something that will require multiple mayoral administrations to kind of see through. And there has to be really smooth transitions between them.
How old is the infrastructure that you're talking about? I think you talked about that a little bit. I mean, you have to introduce if you want to be successful, because Rikers, seems to lurch from one crisis to the next, you have to introduce a bit of a sense of crisis or urgency to the calculation, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. So there are 4 wastewater treatment facilities around Rikers. So there's 2 in Queens, 1 is Wards Island, and 1 is in Hunts Point in the Bronx. All of them are at least, at this point, 85 years old. So they all needed to be replaced yesterday, honestly, but they need to be replaced soon. And so again, this is something where we talk about just water quality and the ability of, you know, us to have, I guess like the quality of life in a very modern capitalist, city. We need to have the money to do this work, and we also need a government that's willing to actually do it and to really oversee it to make sure it gets done. And so, again, that all requires like a very informed citizenry that understands the promises that the city's made and is willing to kind of keep that promise, even when the person that made that promise is no longer in office.
The legislation Michael's referenced, the Renewable Rikers roadmap, is, I think, a critical next step for us to force the next administration to really start the diligent and comprehensive planning that's necessary for us to maximize the opportunities on Rikers Island. That bill comes through the committee that I have the good fortune of chairing, and we're planning for a hearing on that bill, hopefully October. Nothing is set in stone, but that's our tentative plans at this time. So the kind of next key step in the legislative process is for us to have a hearing on the bill, for people like Michael to come and offer smart testimony about why we need to pass it, and then hopefully from there we'll be able to get it over the finish line. My colleague Sandy Nurse from Cypress Hills and Bushwick is the lead sponsor on that bill and has been really doing a great job building momentum for it. I really can't underscore enough how phenomenal an opportunity we have on Rikers Island. If we were to pursue, new wastewater treatment plant facilities, that could take up a couple hundred of the acres, and we still have a couple hundred acres to play with to think about how do we advance our environmental justice goals.
The other part of it is extending LaGuardia Runway, right? Isn't that
Definite possibility. I don't think that anything is set in stone at this time. And so, we're going to have a new administration soon, and we're going to have to start getting serious and diligent in our planning. I'm really focused on wind power because I think that is the real key to us advancing our environmental goals. There's a clean energy hub that's being planned right now, kind of by Vinegar Hill and Dumbo, and the idea there is that it will be able to take in new wind energy coming in off the coast of Long Island that could power half the homes in Brooklyn, right? So we're not talking about, solar on your rooftop that's going to reduce your use of the grid for a few hours a day. We're talking about game changers that can actually achieve our climate justice goals. So there's a lot we can do. I often think about, there's this little repair shop that the Department of Transportation has on Kent Avenue in Williamsburg, right on the waterfront on the East River. And they repair random things in there. It has no business being on the water, right? Where we could have great park space, where we could have, access to the waterfront. But it's just been there for decades, and so it is. We could think about every one of those facilities that are in the heart of dense communities where we could build park space or dynamic affordable housing or mixed use, development, and move them all to Rikers Island, right? And then think about all of the 1,000 flowers that could bloom in every neighborhood across New York City if we relocated some of those noxious or just unnecessary uses that we have in the heart of our neighborhoods. There's just so much opportunity. We need a team that's ready to really plan and think about how do we take advantage of this. Because as Michael said, this is going to happen over a period of many years, but we can start now if we have the political will. And I'm hopeful that the next administration will actually want to work with all of us in the council, advocacy community to make it happen.
I think it's also worth mentioning, in addition to education, that, the folks who work on the Closed Rikers campaign and the folks at Freedom Agenda who are here, who have, literature in the table, I'm super privileged to be able to work closely with them. As somebody who is not directly impacted, to have a way as just like an ordinary, citizen, here are all these steps. So I would encourage people to check out Freedom Agenda, get on their mailing list, and they have all these really, really great practical steps for folks who just want to do something to push this forward now, today. I think that's another kind of avenue for people to go with.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I think now we can have some questions if Marcia's around. Oh, okay. Does anyone have any questions on this subject or something Rikers related?
Hi, thank you. Rikers obviously has a substantive importance in terms of the criminal justice system in New York City, but it also is very symbolic. And so I guess in some ways, my question is, what does the lessons of how much effort, how much time, how much resistance has been involved in dealing with this one part of the carceral criminal justice system, to change that, what does that say about the bigger work, which is really about changing the entire system of how we criminalize people, incarcerate them, and treat them throughout the city? What's the, I guess I'm kind of saying, what's the work after Rikers Island? Because as hard as this has been, there's more work to be done.
Sure. That's a really big question. For me as a historian and as someone who's been sort of working and writing about this, my number one goal is that when Rikers closes, that the people who are directly impacted, who have been doing all of this work to close it, are the people who get credit for it. So I feel like one of the really incredible opportunities with this is to say, like, it is possible for people who are directly impacted by oppression to create change in this way. And that those are the folks we should listen to, and those are the people who actually have the plan. So I think, and maybe I'm just speaking, from my own bias, that controlling a sort of public narrative about incarceration, I think closing Rikers could really shape what's possible. It can highlight other movements that are happening in other cities, through sort of environmental justice issues, we can create kind of reparative movements, right? We can also acknowledge and figure out how to honor the great impact that incarceration has had on so many people in this country and who those people are. Yeah, I think that's my attempt at answering that question. But I think it would be a huge deal in the history of the United States to close such a notorious place in a way that has never been done, not like this, not that I know of. So it really would be history in making. And I think people would look back to it as a model for how to do this in other places. I would.
I think that's all so right and well said. Maybe a little bit more granularly, I think that it's going to take significant ongoing effort for us to drive down the number of people who are incarcerated in New York City. And so we need to continue to deepen our investments in successful evidence-based programs like supervised release and alternatives to incarceration that support people and connect them to the right resources and opportunities if they've made a mistake, if they've committed a crime that is not just a carceral solution. We're not eliminating jails in New York City. We're still going to have these 4 borough-based jails, and they're still going to accommodate thousands of people. And we need to make sure that they are much better run and much different than the disaster that Rikers has always been. And that's going to require our ongoing engagement and oversight. And the Department of Corrections just desperately needs to be transformed. And if it's the same broken system that has been operating on Rikers Island, and we don't intervene meaningfully to change how things work in these borough-based jails, we're going to see many of the same problems. And these are new and better facilities that have access to treatment and healthcare, that have access to light, that have access to courthouses and your lawyers and your families to be able to visit. This should be a much better system, but the building itself isn't going to solve all of our problems, and we're going to need to continue to be meaningfully engaged there. And I would just say, like, since the 70s, or the last 50 years, I think that one of, if not the single worst thing that has happened in the United States has been this era of mass incarceration. And there is a lot of work that we need to do to continue to support people who've been through our criminal justice system.
I mean, the population did go down after COVID to 4,500, and now it's gone back up. So it is possible. I mean, the counter now is that the people who are in Rikers now are charged with more serious crimes. So this is like when you've taken away the people who were arrested on lower level nonviolent crimes. This is the heart of it, and I don't think I've seen like a really like I haven't seen that analysis really done. It seems like there's validity to that position that many of the people on Rikers now are
Allegedly have committed serious crimes.
allegedly have committed serious
I
crimes.
think
right?
that there are still too many people who are there for minor issues, and there are still too many people who. But I do think that that's right. We do, as a result of some of the bail reform changes, a higher percentage of the people who are there have allegedly committed more serious crimes. That doesn't mean that our judicial system is functioning properly. It doesn't mean that where we have just extraordinarily delays in our court system, where people should be getting in and out of Rikers in a matter of months, but it can be a matter of years, and that can significantly drive down the population.
It doesn't seem like there's a direct relationship between the size of the jail population and whether or not crime is up or down. If you look at two administrations,
I think you can go back longer than these last two administrations. I mean, I think it shocks people to realize that for nearly 30 years in New York City, we saw declines in crime and declines in the incarcerated population concurrently. And there's just no data to show in New York City that incarcerating more people leads to safer cities. And I think that we found that the experience people have on Rikers Island is so harmful and so debilitating that it's not actually helping and rehabilitative and supporting people getting on the right track. It has the opposite effect.
well, if you talk to people who were there as teenagers, they call it gladiator school. You hear that a lot. So, was there another question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it does seem to me every American city has a jail system. And what I haven't seen is the reporting on per capita. Does New York City have more individuals detained in their jails per capita? I actually checked today. New York City has a population about almost three times the size of Chicago. Chicago has about 6,800 individuals in their jails. So almost as many as New York City. Well, okay, but I haven't. One second. So it seems to me like Rikers is never going to be closed until there's a confidence that we have enough borough-based jail beds. I don't know how many we need. I wish we didn't need any, but maybe in Brooklyn Heights here, we don't want to be accused of NIMBYism, so maybe we should volunteer to have like a second borough-based facility here. I have the good fortune of living in your district, council member. We have to have sufficient capacity in the boroughs before it would be responsible to close Rikers.
And there are other cities that are doing things much worse than us. Chicago and Philadelphia come to mind with much higher rates of incarceration among pretrial detainees than New York City does. But we can do much better. And a great deal of thought and research and analysis went into the size of the borough-based jails. And I'm confident that we can more than accommodate the incarcerated population in New York City in the plan for borough-based jails and in the hospital facilities that need to be built out. So many folks may not be aware of this, but the de Blasio administration fully funded 3 facilities at public hospitals for detainees who have the most serious and complex health needs so that they could have immediate and direct access to the health care that they need. Despite these facilities being fully funded, 356, I believe, is the number of beds. The Adams administration built Bellevue, but then refused the site at Bellevue, but has refused to seek the state approval to actually open the site. So it's sitting there vacant. And they've done nothing to move forward at North Central Bronx and Woodhull, the other 2 locations. The borough-based jail in Brooklyn is in our district. It's just a few blocks from here at Borum and Atlantic, as Howard knows well. He's been he's the president of the Borum Health Association, one of the leading community voices that's been helping to shape this project. Or trying to shape this project is maybe the better way to say it. Sorry, Howard. We've all been pretty frustrated by our collaboration with the Adams administration, or lack thereof. But I do believe that with smart, targeted investments, we can actually safely reduce the incarcerated population and manage with the 4 borough-based jails and other hospital facilities that we have, and that those are viable solutions. I do think that there are a lot of smart ways we can reduce the incarcerated population in New York City that save us money, because incarcerating people is stupidly expensive. So if we were to actually invest in supervised release, if we were to invest more in housing solutions for justice-involved supportive housing, and a variety of other ways, and work with the court system to speed up trials, these are all ways that we can smartly and effectively and I think safely reduce the incarcerated population. I do believe it's very possible. I do think it's a question of political will.
Thank you. Another question? Ma'am?
Oh, she already called.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, so a lot of the organizers who I know who've been advocating for the closing of Rikers are abolitionists. And so how are you working with abolitionists in honoring their demands when they've been the ones pushing and doing the labor to close Rikers, which would mean the end of all prisons and also defunding the police?
I can answer that one.
It's our pinch hitter.
So as a
Shot for this
yes,
one.
thank you.
No, thank you.
As a formerly incarcerated individual who is an advocate for the closure of Rikers Island, and I am a survivor of Rikers, and you see the film that I created, right? So I'm gonna tell you this: the elected officials such as Lincoln Ressler has been working with us continuously, right? And we've been collaborating a lot. If we haven't, this would have never came about, right? The plan to close Rikers would have never came about, which was navigated by people like myself who survived Rikers, who survived prison, and want to make the best of this of our community, right? Some of us have hurt our community, so we want to make our community better. So a lot of things I wanted to say. I wanted to touch on the question that somebody answered earlier about, what about afterwards? What happens when Rikers is closed and there's borough-based jails? This is something that's historic. That's why I'm so glad that this is here at the Center for Brooklyn History, because this is something that's very historic. Not only are we going to save about $1.2 billion that the community can benefit from, right? CUNY could benefit from that. The library, the Center for Brooklyn History, all these places could benefit from the closure of Rikers Island just based off money, right? So I just wanted to bring that out there because it's very important to say that this is history. We're living history right now. This has never been done in New York City, ever. The last penal colony that was closed was Alcatraz, and it still exists, and they use it as a tourist attraction. That's why I named the movie Closing the Last Penal Colony, because it is a penal colony. It's 10 jails, right? It's 10 buildings plus the boat. Right, so it's a colony, and that's exactly why I named it that, because it's the last one here. If Alcatraz, we don't want it to become an Alcatraz where people visit and have a tourist attraction, right? We don't want that to happen. That's why it's very important that people understand Renewable Rikers is gonna actually eliminate those buildings and do something positive with the land. So I just wanted to bring that out. I hope I answered your questions.
I would also like to add to that. I don't mean to keep harping on this point about depersonalizing, right, Rikers Island, but so I'm also a person who would absolutely love to live in a world without prisons. But I want the people who are currently incarcerated at Rikers to enjoy that world with me. And so, I understand that there's a lot of abolitionist resistance to the borough-based jail plan, and I understand it. But I do think that as long as we are keeping people on a terrible, inhumane, toxic site on Rikers where people are dying, right? People are supposed to come home from jail. That's not supposed to be the last place you go. And so I do think that it's really urgent to get people off of Rikers. So those folks who are also, right, residents of New York, right? Those are also New Yorkers. Those are folks who should be a part of this conversation about what happens to Rikers, but we need to get them in a place of survival in order for those folks to participate in this conversation, in this movement, et cetera. So I think there's a level of urgency there that you can't ignore, even as we do want to, right, do things like decarcerate and defund the police.
We have time for one more question, and I saw one in the middle here. Somebody here, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if this is a consideration, but while we're talking about decarceration and like sort of the reduction of the incarcerated population. Has there ever been a fear that like obviously the borough-based jails are being built, and has there ever been a fear that Rikers won't close and they will just have more jails in general in New York, or is that not something that's going to happen?
I mean, that's it's what's possible is that there'll be this long dragged out thing where you'll sort of a middle ground where Rikers will stay open. It will stay in custody, quite literally, of the correction department, and the borough-based jails will be finished and operating, but you'll continue to have the jails. I mean, it's very hard. Somebody once said, I can't remember who said this, was it once that a government agency controls something, it's incredibly hard to get it to relinquish that control. Government agencies expand control, they don't relinquish control. So that's my take on that. I mean, I think that the borough jail, I think we're looking at like 31, 32, 33 for these jails to be open, right?
Yeah, that's right. The law states that all of the jails on Rikers Island must close by 2027. And the first borough-based jail will not be built until 2029. So there's a disconnect. Things got slowed down a bit during COVID. It was an ambitious timeline. And then the Adams administration has moved with, glacial speed. As Graham noted, we're looking at probably 2032, 33 for when the 4 borough-based jails will be completed. And if a new administration were to invest in policies to safely reduce incarceration and speed up the construction of the borough-based jails, it could be a year or two faster, but we're talking about that ballpark. My expectation is that if there's a more functional relationship between the mayor and the council in January, that we'll renegotiate the terms of the borough-based jail closure and work on some sort of agreement. But if that is not followed through upon, I assume this goes to the courts and it'll be subject to litigation.
Is it possible to shorten the timeline, or is the timeline now a fait accompli?
My understanding of the timeline is that it's actually in the zoning code, which makes it really hard to change. But I think
No, I mean the actual timeline of
to build the jail.
When the earliest jail that's going to be opened according to timeline is Brooklyn, right?
I think that there's probably some ways that we could speed some things up, but we'll have to work with the new administration to evaluate and bring a fresh set of eyes to look at their jail construction timelines and see if they can be revisited. Some outside folks, including the kind of Lippman Commission 2.0, led by the former New York State Chief Judge, Jonathan Lippman, suggested a variety of strategies for how you could speed up jail construction and go faster. I think we need some additional look at that, but I'm hopeful. I'm not certain. I expect that we'll negotiate some sort of updated timeline with meaningful impacts, meaningful repercussions if the deadlines are not reached, and we'll try our best to get it closed as quickly as humanly possible.
Interesting. Okay, I think that's it. I want to thank our panelists and you all for coming out, and Marcia for arranging all this and this beautiful space, and Edwin for his film, which looks really good, and Rikers is so closely intertwined with the city's history and the way the city functions that even though many people never see it, it's like right there. It's like right under the surface. So it's something that we have to consider. Also, I just want to throw in one plug. The Daily News Union is involved in a tough fight for a contract. The previous owners broke the union in the early 1990s, and we're now trying to get the first contract since then. So we're small, we're beleaguered, we're only 50 members, and the council is actually going to pass a resolution on our behalf tomorrow. We're up against a big hedge fund, so if you like our work, write a letter to the editor, and if you like what we do, or if you hate it, also write a letter to the editor. And thank you so much for coming out.